welcome to episode 34 of the Anthrozoology podcast. Today we're continuing our special series on the history and future of the field of anthrozoology, and we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Lynette Hart. Dr. Hart is the Department Vice Chair and Professor of Population Health and Reproduction in the School of Veterinary Medicine at UC Davis. Her research focuses on human, other than human-animal interactions, animal behavior, and welfare. She's also one of the founders of the field of anthrozoology and the International Society for Anthrozoology, also known as ISAZ, as well as the recipient of the ISAZ Distinguished Anthrozoologist Award for Outstanding Lifetime Achievement. I'm Michelle Szydlowski, an anthrozoologist focused on pachyderm-human relations, pachyderm conservation, and the ways in which humans use language to control the narrative of other than human animal lives.
Hi, I'm Kris, and I completed my PhD in Anthrozoology last year, and my research focuses on cat-human relations and discourses surrounding roaming cats.
Hi, my name's Oxley Heaney. I'm a PhD candidate with the University of Exeter, and I'm looking at shark-human relationships. I'm also very interested in the feline lives of Saudi cats, especially the abandonment of cats.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Hart.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
So what do you think about sort of the future of people who are interested in the field, who are looking for more than, a micro-credential, that are looking for a career in academia or as a practitioner? What advice would you give them? We joke about Hal's advice, don't major in anthrozoology. And so, what would you recommend? Seeking, psychology or anthropology or veterinary medicine? What route would you suggest for young people who might be listening and really passionate about getting involved?
Well, we have a website that we created for undergrads because actually they kept saying we need help in how we can get foundational courses in anthrozoology, and they wanted to create their own individualized program. So it's such a broad field and has so many different facets. The main thing a student has to do is figure out where they want to head. What's the part of it that resonates with them, that gives them a fire in their belly? What are the activities that they're comfortable with or not comfortable with? That's a lot to always be learning about throughout your whole life. It's constantly evolving. So then if they put together something from a human side and something from an animal side for their major and minor while they're undergrads and get experiences, they can learn more about what direction they want to go. It usually makes sense to get an advanced degree in some established field like epidemiology or geography or behavior or NPB, physiology, anything like that, or one of the professions like social work or psychology, a clinical practice degree, or veterinary medicine. So it's going to be a different answer for each person. Anthropology. Those are all avenues, and it's just so broad and comprehensive. But it's true, they should have their eye on what job opportunity might be down the line. But as a counter example, I'll mention that I've had maybe 10 students do PhDs in geography. And at UC Davis, we could argue that we're the biggest biology campus because we have the most animal use protocols. We have such a diverse array of species and so many of them. Plus, our graduate students usually don't get degrees from departments. Most of them get degrees from graduate groups. And graduate groups are cross-departmental entities that include faculty from 10 or more departments. So, for example, we have graduate groups in epidemiology, animal behavior, ecology, and so on. So many places where a student who loved behavior or who loved human-animal interactions could find a great home, get excellent tools, to carry them forward and qualify them for a variety of positions. So that's why most of my students who were quirky, they never could have gotten admitted to animal behavior because that graduate group at Davis has more than 100 applicants and it takes about 5 students. So it will only take someone who's already written their NSF pre-doc and probably going to get funded. Well, but the students that I took were fabulous. They became stars in geography, and miraculously, they all have found their way to positions in field research. How is that even possible? Such positions don't exist. They're never advertised, but they're all doing that kind of work. 2 of them at Friday Harbor, where there are orcas swimming by every day. One of them in Tanzania, another in South Africa. So they knew what they were wanting and they found their way to where they were going. And there were just a few that landed in research positions at major universities, like Noah Pinter-Wollman, who is at UCLA. And, that's, most people aren't like that. Anyway, you need to figure out who you are, what you want, what's going to be a good fit for you.
Can I extend that question to how do you think that anthrozoologists, or in that broad field, can engage more with the public as well? I mean, so many publications, I know there's lots of open access, but lots of publications are behind paywalls. I'm just wondering how we can how as anthrozoologists we could become better at engaging. We have a podcast, for example, we have a podcast, other people have different things. Do you think there's other ways that you are aware of or would recommend in engaging more with the public?
Well, we started publishing entirely in open access about, 10 or 12 years ago. And the public finds their way to papers. The paper that we did on 35 breeds of dogs and the age of spay neuter for those 35 breeds of dogs, the age that is recommended to avoid them getting an increased risk for joint disorders or cancers, that has 1.8 million reads. So people find their way to anything that they think is important for their own animal. People really, that's a real heavy, important point to know. People really care about their animals. And these days, they're very proficient in digging up whatever information they think might be useful for that. So that's one thing. Getting a press release done on work that is going to be of some interest is worth doing. UC Davis does good press releases, and they get sent around the world that way. It's tough because the information is flying out of a fire hose at everyone all the time. The thing that I did when I shifted over to open access is I organized research topics because I said, there's almost nothing out there on children and pets. So we did a research topic on that. There's almost nothing out there on service dogs. We did one on that. And those were done quite a while ago. Then more recently, we did one on the stress for people working in zoo and aquarium environments. And we finished that one. And then very recently, we finished one that's an ebook on cats and their behavior and interactions with cats. And the last one that we'll be finishing in the next couple of months is on spay neuter, which was kind of a wild and crazy topic at the time we started it, but now it's a hot topic.
Okay, so I guess my next question is, where do you see anthrozoology going? Will it become its own established field? Is it good if it became its own established field? Is it better that it's part of other fields? What do you think the future will look like?
It's going to be both of those things. it's a great tool to add on to anything. It's great to have that perspective, to have an understanding of that importance and to carry that with you in whatever field you have. And you can be in any field and have a kind of an emphasis on anthrozoology. You can carry it anywhere. And obviously, it is becoming its own field to some degree. It's not going to become huge, but it is becoming its own field as well. So I think both things are going to happen. And having these certificate programs delivers it to everyone. And people can enter it at any level they want. They can be at a PhD level, or they can be at a take a single course level. So it's very different than mathematics or engineering or any of those areas. It's always going to be different. I was going to say, you know, the funding, the pet food companies are putting more funding than ever into it and thinking about how to be strategic to increase pet ownership. So that piece of the field is always going to be well funded. So if you're interested in other areas, you still have to be really creative in thinking about how to fund what it is you want to do.
Did you say that you didn't think anthrozoology was going to be huge?
I don't think as a single established discipline, it's not going to be like the Department of Mathematics in every university, or the Department of English, or the Department of Physiology. It's going to be a few universities will have such a department, but not all universities. Never will that happen. Some like University of Arizona is putting that out as a special emphasis that they're going to develop. So there will be a few stellar places that are doing work at a high level with quite a few people collaborating. But Lori Kogan is doing something really remarkable in psychology, clinical psychology at Colorado State, because she created the Human Animal Interactions Bulletin. She carried it out of her side pocket for 10 years, and now it's being published by CABI. So, and she has webinars and a web listserv. She welcomes everyone, and her entity is part of APA, the American Psychological Association. So psychology is moving ahead, and she's carrying anthrozoology into psychology. It's becoming more and more impactful, and she has a mechanism for delivering it to a wide audience. So this is happening in her profession of clinical psychology. I think that's really important. Yeah, and a similar thing is happening in social work, veterinary social work out of Tennessee. So we're seeing it's not all led anymore by volunteers. All this work used to be done, most of it by volunteers, but now there's professional leadership, which is really good.
I think that that's a really good point, because that's a good way for practitioners or other people to get involved in learning about these topics, is to sign up for those human animal interaction bulletins, to sign up for the Animals in Society Institute newsletters, to sign up for, you know, a lot of different sort of boards that are out there that'll just populate your email with information on things that might interest you. Facebook has become a huge thing for bee finding webinars, right? Because you put an interest in these human animal studies groups or the anthrozoology group, and you're hit with a million different webinars, a lot of which are hybrid and free. So it's a great place. And I think one of the overlooked areas is that, you know, I have so many friends that are primatologists or anthropologists by nature. And I think that group is very much a group of anthrozoologists. They just don't know it. And so I think that that's one group that has sort of stayed off to the side rather than, you know, incorporating fully with anthrozoology. And I think that that's a big yet to be discovered connection.
Well, primatologists have their tradition of long-term longitudinal studies that go on for decades, and that's kind of the way they've done it. And they're probably not going to move away from that quickly. And in a way, that was also what was done with elephants, but it seems like it's been possible to come in and do discrete studies with elephants from a variety of angles, as well as having the longitudinal work. But it doesn't seem to happen with primates as much.
I was thinking more from the arena of seeing individuals as individuals rather than members of a species, and identifying specific genealogical lines. And it just seems like there's a lot more interest in the anthropologists that I know that in that recognizing individuals, I think, as a lot of anthrozoologists try to.
So you're offering this wonderful conference every year for students. So you're really in touch with what's happening from the ground up right now, what's happening out there in the up and comers. So that's really fascinating. And I'm wondering what you're noticing about that.
I think the first striking thing is we do demographics of our participants and presenters. And I think the minority are males, something like 5% come forward as male. And but also with participants, so sort of senior, I think Michelle may have lost her connection.
Yeah.
But also sort of at the higher levels in anthrozoology or human animal studies, it really is female leadership, which I think really is kind of cool and makes a distinction from some of the other more traditional fields where you have a lot of females at the lower end, but it sort of peters out at the more senior level. But also the other thing is that I think is unique to anthrozoology or human animal studies is you mentioned sort of quirky students, but I really think there's this sort of bringing together of a lot of non-traditional students or have come to academia later because they've suddenly found this they can study this field. And it's like, and I had the similar sort of experience. I had a career change, and it was like when I first saw the course in anthrozoology at Exeter and I was looking through the syllabus, I'm like, and I was looking for something totally unrelated, and I'm like, this is so cool. I wish I'd found this 20 years ago or whatever, or when I was first starting. And eventually I'm just like, I'm going to do it anyway. And there's a lot of people like me who've found it sort of, or people coming in from professionals sort of coming in from animal training or working with animals and then discovering the academic side is there now. But yeah, that's my take. And sort of what I really get from the students is that students are really diverse.
So is that Exeter as well? Do you have mostly very diverse array?
Yeah, the conference, we've got students from all over. I mean, I think American students tend to be more confident. So it's the undergrads are the Americans. We've been trying to push from Europe to get more undergrads to be brave. But yeah, the American undergrads tend to be more confident. But yeah, we have lots of participants from all over.
And I guess Michelle would know that the host of the conference, the ISAZ conference this year, is another example of someone who's kind of a re-entry student who decided to follow something she loved. And she's very excited to have learned about this field and be in it now.
Right.
So you'll see that.
Sorry, I disappeared there. I don't know what happened.
I mean, one of the things that strikes me about the anthrozoology is international practice, but also the MA program Exeter is the range of intriguing projects that people come up with. Things that are just so interesting and diverse. It doesn't seem to be one strand of one species and one set. It's like, wow, how did you think of that? That's absolutely incredible. And we'll probably include the abstract book for the AIP in the references here. And just having a quick look through it now. I mean, there's wasps, otters, cows in India, cow vigilantism in India, wild cats. There's just a whole bunch of really super
corals.
interesting
Somebody did corals, right? Last year or the year before.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm sort of, you don't think of corals as animals, right?
No, I think you're really leading the way in keeping people's view broad at looking at all the possibilities. So that's an important contribution you're making.
And we enjoy it because, too, it's someplace that a lot of students don't feel like they sort of fit in, I think, to their department, right? They feel like they might be kind of out there in the way they look at other than human animals as, individuals and worthy beings. And so it's nice to have a safe place to kind of get with like-minded people and be able to talk about, those things. I think even within, a lot of students are in psychology departments or biology departments, and they feel a little bit, aside of those rather than being fully belonging. So it's been lovely.
Great. So in the States, we have Canisius and also Carroll College, where students major in anthrozoology for a bachelor's degree. And so they're pretty immersed already by the time they have a bachelor's degree. It would be interesting to know, to get some kind of real follow-up analysis of where do they carry that, or what do they do with it? Because they'd have this super strong foundation to build on, and then probably moving into something a little more conventional for graduate work, which is sort of a flip of what a lot of people would do.
And I think it's interesting too, because
sorry, I'm cutting you, and I'm just saying it's the opposite in Europe, where there is no undergraduate Anthrozoology courses, but masters and now a PhD.
And I was going to say that we feel like we've seen a big difference between these programs in the US and programs overseas, just in breadth and focus, both, because it seems like a lot of the American-based programs are very much centered on animals in service, right? AIAT, nose work, all kinds of working animals.
Training the animal. Too.
Right, as opposed to a lot of overseas, a lot of, we have friends in Romanian programs, we have, friends in the UK. A lot of those are more focused on animal agency. And so there tends to be a big difference in where you go, what your future career is based on where you start, right? Are you in a more American-based service animal use sort of training program, or are you in a study animals as individual agents sort of program? So that's been interesting as well. That would be a good study too, to see where people end up depending on where they started in those programs.
I think also another aspect is something you brought up, which is where do people go, is where can they go? What is available? Because so many people have to end up going into something that doesn't necessarily fit, but you have to earn money because you have to live. Well, the thing that you're maybe passionate about, you have to create that opportunity yourself, because it's very unlikely you're going to be part of a group of people applying for a job, talking to frogs in a pond, for example, or something like that. You have to go out and this is something that I think we're finding in terms of trying to look around at grants and maybe finding different ways, maybe beyond grants. We're kind of like feeling our way through that at the moment. So that we can follow our passions while we're not tied to specific normalized anchors that stifle our passions.
It's useful to know how that's working for these undergraduates and where they're heading, because that would tell you something about what it would mean if we offered undergraduate major degrees. Windsor also has one. Beth Daly has one. So where do they all head for jobs?
I think it's interesting too, in would make for a good study to see what the desire is when you start that program, right? Do you want to, I mean, the program that I'm teaching in currently is in the Department of Biology, but it is aimed at formal and informal educators. And what tends to happen is that a lot of these people are teaching now and then move on to a lot of nonprofit and community-based conservation work, which I find so fascinating. And most of them have done exactly what you mentioned earlier. They have created their own path into the field, right? These are not jobs that existed before. And I find that really fascinating, in that coming from a teaching background, which you did, which I did, you know, it seems to be a pretty common background. And I'm wondering if this sort of switch to a more humane education process has helped with that. You know, people are beginning to see that there is a need and a desire for that, and following it out into different careers rather than just not just teaching, but you know what I mean? Rather than teaching in a classroom, they're expanding that out into the wider world.
Well, that's exciting that that's working for them, because, and that's how the field started. We were all doing something else and we kind of added this on. So I'm happy to hear that some people are still able to do that, because it is a way that the field advances. Yeah.
So what would you like to see, sort of as a last question there, what would you like to see either change or develop or expand sort of overall in anthrozoology? What would you like to see happen?
Well, I think I'd like to see it be more common for some kind of an undergraduate minor to be available, if that could be widespread, because then people would begin to get some chops in this area. They would know about it. It would be more visible in our culture as an important discipline where people actually do research. So that would be kind of a reasonable goal, I think, and wouldn't debilitate people in terms of having a career, but would make them more informed about this discipline.
Excellent answer. I think too, we're seeing a lot of expansion in ethics departments. You know, people who study ethics have switched to animal ethics. And you mentioned the human geographers. I feel like the human geography departments have gotten hugely involved in anthrozoological topics.
Then it's coming from the humanities side. And I think this field is really underrepresented still in the humanities. And that would be another goal, to ramp it up in that side, get those primatologists thinking more about interactions.
Thank you for joining us today for the Anthrozoology podcast with our special guest, Dr. Lynette Hart. References mentioned herein are listed in the show notes, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.